Hey there! Today I'm going to show you how I cast on my socks using Judy's Magic Cast On. I did not create this cast on. I use it all the time. I use it when I do short row toes and when I do increase on both side toes. It doesn't matter. I love it both ways. So today I'm using this awesome ball of rainbow yo-yo from Mustache Yarn. It's delicious, a Canadian yarn dyer. And I'm going to use my Chai-Gu red lace. And these ones here are a 2.5 millimeter or 1.5. You can use a bit smaller or a bit bigger depending on the size of your feet. I wear size 11 shoes, so I've got big honkin' feet, and I use a bit bigger needle than some maybe would choose to, and that's just because I would rather do fewer stitches and have them a little bit looser. So that's what I do. When I make socks for my husband, I use a 275, and when I make them for my daughter, I use a 225. And then I just make the exact same pattern for all three of us with the exact same number of stitches, just using the different size needles changes my gauge enough to give us each a different fit. So I have 2 balls of this yarn. If the lovely Mustache Yarn hadn't sent me 2 matching balls, the first step would be obviously to weigh out your yarn and wind it so that you have 2 equal balls. Now normally it comes in 100 grams, so you'd be looking at 2 50-gram balls, but this one's come like that, and she's also even made sure that they match up. So you can see here that I have a little tail of purple on both of them, and then it changes to the turquoisey color. I've hand wound them into a center pull ball. I prefer a center pull ball, but it's totally up to you how you do that. So I'm just going to start with one of them, so I'll set this one aside. And excuse me, I have a cold. So I'm going to take about half of what's here for the purple, so you can see that's about half of the purple, and this bend is where I'm going to put the yarn onto my needles. Now my needles I'm going to put in front of me. The top one's going to be a bit shorter than the bottom one. So I'm going to loop that on and make sure that the short tail is closest to me. And then I'm going to hold them in my hands like this. So I'll do that again. I'm going to put my fingers in between and then grab. So it's almost like a Y. And this thumb here is very important because it's holding it so it doesn't slide right off like that. Okay, so again, I'm going to grab with these 2 fingers, spread with these 2 fingers, or finger and thumb, and then I'm set. So the top yarn, I'm going to call that the top and this the bottom. The top yarn's always going to go on the bottom needle. The bottom yarn's always going to go on the top needle. And we're always going to loop from the bottom up. So bottom up, bottom up, bottom up, bottom up. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do the 2 sets, or the pairs or couplets or whatever you want to call them. I'm going to do them 12 times. I usually do my socks in 36 stitches across, so 72 around. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So there's my cast on. The tail is going to wrap across there to hold it snug so that you don't lose that first stitch, because that first stitch is really only being held on by the grace of my hands. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set them up so that what would look like the back of the stitches is facing me, and pull out the top needle. And then I'm going to knit into the bottom stitches. I'm going to treat this as my tail now and knit like I normally would. So, whoops, just make sure you don't get tangled. Pull some of that yarn out. So I'm just going to do a straight knit row all the way across. Sorry, I'm bopping the camera here. Whoops. So once I get to the other side, I'm going to pull the back needle through and transfer the stitches to the front and do the same thing on the other side. That will make a lot more sense in just a moment. So last stitch. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it, put these stitches on this needle, and pull this needle out, and I'm going to knit across one more time. So this will start my tip of my toe, and I'm going to continue to knit all the way up my sock past where my heel is going to go. I don't stop and knit my heel in. I used to, and then I discovered Afterthought heel, and the fit is a dream. So I only use Afterthought heel now. And once you discover it, you'll love it. There's no gaps or holes on the sides where you might find gaps and holes in other sock methods. And you can really get a nice snug fit. So I'm going to just pull my tail a little bit because you saw that stitch was getting a little bit big. Now I've done a knit on both sides, and now I'm going to start to do my increases. So you can already see that I've changed colors. That beautiful turquoise is coming through with the purple. So again, I'm going to switch my knitting and pull the bottom one out, push the top one in. So in this round, I'm going to increase. So what I'm going to be doing is making the wedge shape of the toe. So I'm going to increase every other row. Every other row I'm going to knit, and then every other row I'm going to increase. So the increase pattern is knit 1. Now some folks will do lift the bar in the middle and knit it. It leaves a little bit of a hole. So what I do is I knit front, and then I insert my needle back into the back, and I knit back. So I knit front and back of the second stitch, and then I knit across until the second last stitch, and then I'm going to knit front and back on that second last stitch as well, and that's going to take my row from 12 up to 14. So let's get to the end here. Now these needles are big enough to be doing two socks at a time. So if you use a smaller needle, you won't have this big bulk, but this is my 2 at a time set. So I've done a stitch in the front, and now I'm going to go around to the back, put my needle in the back, and knit the back stitch. So now I got 2 stitches out of that second to last stitch, and now I have 14 stitches across here and 12 across here. So I'm going to turn my work, and I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to shift onto the other needle, and I'm going to stitch the first stitch normally. So do the first one, normal knit. Then the second one is going to be knit front, knit back, and then knit across to the second last stitch. On that second last stitch, again, we're going to do knit front, knit back, and then knit that last stitch. So right now, every time I have this tail close to where I'm working, I know that's the beginning of my row. You're going to weave that tail in at the end, but for right now, I'm going to start to tuck it inside the sock. So in order to remember where I am, I'm going to actually take a stitch marker and just stick it on there so that I know where my start is. And every time I get to that point, I'm going to switch. So if I'm doing a knit row, then when I get to this stitch marker, I'm going to switch to an increase row. And if I'm doing an increase row, I'm going to switch to a knit row. Now, one thing that I usually do to help me remember which row I'm on is on my project bag, I put a wonder clip, and when it's red, I'm increasing. When it's white, when it's white, I'm just doing a straight knit. And so at the end of each row, I will switch it. So I just did an increase row, so I'm going to do a knit row next, and then when I get to the end, I'll switch it. That way, if I go to bed or if I am at the checkout at Walmart waiting to finish and I do half of a row, then I can just leave that always on the right side. Just that's how I remember which side to look at. And then I know that if it's white, that I'm still doing a straight knit. If it's red, I'm doing an increase row. And I'm going to increase until I have 36 stitches across each side. And then I will check back with you. So I'm going to go and do that, and then I'll start part 2 of the video with what I do next. Thanks.